Cron sequencer, replaying crontabs, and the pitfalls on the way. Yeah, I'm Nicholas Clark. I think it says that. Yeah, matches. Okay, let's see if I can drive this thing right this time. So, what is the content of this talk? Structure. I will describe the problem we had at work at PayProp, the solution we've devised to solve this problem, and then that's the first 80% done. And well, then there's this phrase, no plan survives contact with the enemy. I had to rewrite the entire thing. So I will then describe the interesting features of Getopt long that I use that you may not be aware of, that you might find very useful in your own code. And I will finish up with where we are now. And I will try to run to time. And if I'm going too fast, please tell me to slow down. And if I'm doing I think I have to use the space bar. Oh well, here goes. So Cron, you might not be aware, Cron is a job scheduler for that runs on Unix systems. It runs commands at set repeating times, and these commands are described by lines in a crontab file. Cron itself dates from 1975. We're using Debian or Ubuntu actually strictly, and it ships a version of Cron, Vixie Cron 3, with patches, and that dates the original from 1996, which is Perl 5.0.5.03 era. Yeah, I thought that was fun. And what do we do at work? Well, we're dealing with payments, rent payments, and we have a batch processing system that is powered by crontab. The company, the original part of the company, was founded in 2001. The part that I'm in effectively started about 3 years later, but the code derives from that original company, part of the company, and the code has evolved continuously for 21 years. So, yeah, it's ugly code, but it certainly pays our wages. The code is, let's say, battle tested, but not regression tested. It works. But, yeah. So, fine, cool, it works, but why? Well, we want to refactor this code. There's a desire to add features to it. There's a desire to add features to it, and it's really hard. We want to refactor the code, but we want to do that without going bankrupt. Because, you know, we like the company to survive. So basically, we need to test all the corner cases in the production code. Small problem. We don't know where those corner cases are. So we came up with this plan. Well, it's easy. We just rerun history. Wind clock back, go forwards. What that? So, the plan for just rerun history was, we'll take 2 copies of the code base. One will be the original code. One will be our proposed this step of refactoring code. And then for each of these, we would set up databases and local files. We would set the clock to that point in history. We would run the code, and then we would compare the results. The original code, it's basically, and then, if they're the same, we're golden. It's golden results testing. It won't be, the results we get won't be exactly what we have in production, because, for example, we are now running newer code, but the database that we really have in production was run with older code from, say, 15 years ago. So the tables, if we compare to what's really in production, might be different, but it will be consistent to see whether our refactoring changed anything, and it will spot nearly all the regressions we would have made. Oh yeah, and as I said yesterday, it works, but our small errors, if we don't catch them, are kind of bigger than my credit card limit, and our big errors potentially can cost us bigger than my annual salary. We need to be very careful. We are very careful, but this is why we're putting a lot of effort into this. So, there was this guy a while back, a builder, he said, the worst kind of job is a just job. Could you just do this? Just run again. We've got 2 big problems here. Correctness. We are testing interactions with external systems, for example, banks. We don't have their code base. What we kind of want to do is make the files they sent us appear on schedule. And so we need to figure out how to fake that up. We also have a speed problem. Some of our code only runs once a month. Some of our code is end-of-year code. Some of our corner cases are rare. the kind of figure that we're going to need to run about 3 months of history, probably over the year end, to catch most of the corner cases. And we don't want to wait 3 months for every run. So we want to accelerate time, else, each run would take 3 months. Also, to be clear, we're not going to emulate the banks. We're just going to assume that our incoming, that whatever we send them, we're going to check the thing that we generated to send them, and then we're just going to use their next response, whatever happens. We're not going to fake the actual bank's code here. Our aim is to spot changes in our code. We assume the banks will do sensible things. Sorry, a bit digression. So we want to be basically fast and good. What we want to do is, from our cron tabs, generate a list of when things happen, and then for each of those things, set up the initial state, what files we should have seen come in from a bank FTP server, for example, or how the database should be. And then we want to run the code, and then we want to capture the modified state in our 2 copies and say, are they the same? And yeah, if yes, it's good. No, investigate bugs. We're going to assume the banks give us the same answer. I've made my speaker notes really big so I can see them, and now they're too big. We're going to assume the banks give us the same answer, even if we send them the wrong stuff because our code changed. We're not trying to emulate the banks. We're just trying to verify that 2 versions of our code behave identically. So now that what's going to happen. So what do I have? Say I have a cron tab like this. Actually, I should. Timing's fine. You have a cron tab like that, and the columns are, I think, minutes past the hour, hours, months, day of month, month, and week. I can't remember. The stars we're not going to worry about here. This is everything runs daily. And that first line says, on 0 minutes past the hour, well, that first line says something. And it turns out there's lots of tools that can translate that line, like that first line, into what does that mean? So there was that one, crontab guru, which uses, very nice. And it says that first line will run at minute 0 past the hour at 8 and 10. So at 8 and 10, it says coffee. And the second line says at minute 0 past hours 9 and 11, tea. And the third line says at 12:30, lunch. Cool. So I'm going to have 2 cups of coffee and 2 cups of tea and lunch. Right, but actually that's what it said. That's why it exists. But what I really needed was this. Code. I want to know that I'm having coffee, then tea, then coffee, then tea, then lunch. That's what I need. Go look on CPAM. I need a sequence of events. I also need the environment variables that the cron tab can set up. And I need them to be 100% accurate, or at least accurate enough that I shell out, because I want to run those commands. I don't just want to get something. To be fair, I don't have to be completely 100% accurate. I have to be good enough for the stuff we run, and I probably should detect when I'm going to fall into traps. So I'm looking for something that can produce that list of sequenced events accurately, that I could shell them out in accelerated time. And we didn't find anything. Now worried that my timing is fast. What I did find was things that could pass crontab files. Not always correctly. Lovely, I shall make the crontab file into an object-oriented structure, but crontab's got this really weird parser written in C, and some weird things in it that doesn't quite work. I can find things, as I said, like crontab guru, but also Perl code and other language code that will convert those lines to descriptions. Line, line, line. I can find things that run cron in real time. I think Max wrote one. You wrote a drive module of one. Yeah, that's cool. But I don't really want to set the clock back to last year and wait 3 months for things. What I also found was a module, algorithm cron. I think it's Paul Evans. And the key part of that is this very useful thing in there of, given my cron object for a line, tell me the next time it will run, given this time now. And you can actually use, and it says it's an abstract implementation of the cron scheduling algorithm. So I can give it Unix epoch times, and it'll tell me the next time that will run. Now I've got a list of Unix epoch times for each line. For each line of the cron tab, I can sort them in order. Oh, I have to read what my next slide is. Yeah, my next slide is about one talk. So is my problem solved? Well, I just write a parser, a digression. So I have to write a parser to deal with crontab files which contain comments, environment setup. I'll show you some of these in a moment. I think cron commands and syntax errors, which my parser certainly gets. Our cron tabs don't have syntax errors. Cron would fail, but I thought I'd actually write a proper parser. So I fix the parser part. I get a list of lines, and I write parser. It gives me a set of each line of the cron tab becomes an object, which is basically the command I would run and the environment it would run with. On each of those lines, I ask our algorithm cron, when would the next time this fire? I take that long list of firing times and sort with the earliest one first. Hey, first one, fire it, run that. And then I update and resort my list. If you're ahead of me, you'll have noticed that actually my list was in order. I just had to reinsert the next one at the right place. There's not actual sorting, it's a linear scan. Cool, I think we have our problem solved. So I go test it. So we have messy environment variables. We have lots and lots of default environment variables. Every time I ask it for output, it gives me like every time sheep, brave, and whatever. No one's read that, have they? We have some lines of the cron tab where we use things every 5 minutes. And those aren't very interesting to this because I'm trying to look at all the slow stuff and get it in order. So that's cool. I update my code a bit. I add some command line options that suppress the environment variables. So I can say, don't show me path if path is set to that. Don't show me the mail to where all the output noise is going to go to if it's the assumed default. And my output gets a lot cleaner. For those things like every 5 minutes we do X, I add a flag to say, ignore this line of the cron tab. It's not interesting to me at the moment. Everything seems good. Hey, I've got a solution. Problem, I said about timing, I've got 27 minutes left. We're finished, aren't we? Oh, wait. No plan survives contact with the enemy. You see, at this point, I realize I'm thinking that actually there are 2 hosts. We've got this internal host, and it talks to that internal host, and they both have cron tabs. So there's 2 machines, 2 cron tabs. Each cron tab has these 5-minute jobs that fire a lot of the time with noisy output. Great, I just read in 2 files, and I start to refactor my code to read in 2 files, and then I realize, I need to zap out those environment variables for this line of this file, but that line of that file, different lines. And likewise, all that line suppression environment variables have to be available for each file, and they're different from each file, and they should not be confused. So I have to maintain basically command line parsers for each. I had all this stuff hooked onto the output end of my code, not the input end of my code. So time for... You've gone backwards. I had to basically redo everything from the start. I rethought my design. I took my environment handling and I realized I had to move it from the output side of the code to the input side of the code. I was going to have to pass the options multiple times, and how was I going to do this? And yeah, I guess I'm a bit old school. I've used X servers. I've started X servers from the login of Unix systems, and I remember that X servers end up with this double dash where they can separate the complete command pass to the X server from the complete command for the command it's going to start, and both have options in them. And so I realized I kind of want to make my command line run like at the bottom, cron sequencer -- m foo equals bar for file 1, and then a double dash, and then let's start talking about file 2. So in file 2, I'm going to ignore lines 4 and 7, and in file 1, I'm going to assume the environment variable foo has this value. So that's my plan. How I'm going to do this? I've used Getopt long before. I go look harder. Why is the mouse backwards? Getopt long, if you're not familiar with it, is a command line parser. It's a tool for parsing long options, GNU long option formats, double dash ones. It supports double dash arguments in that if you have a command line like that, that is an option. That sets the option. That says, stop here. This is a file called -- argument. I don't know. That's treated as something passed to your program. That's command, not option. That comes in useful. You can stop here. It's very configurable. And it turns out it doesn't just pass argv at argv. You can actually tell an arbitrary array of, I'd like this to be my list of commands, of things. Pass this, please. So I take that thing up there, and I figure what I'm going to do is group it. I'm going to take that line, cron sequencer, blah, 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 and I'm going to iterate along the real original argv that you saw there, and I'm going to split it every time I meet dash dash. So I pick up dash dash m, foo equals bar, and file 1, stop. That's my first array of things. And I pick up dash dash ignore, 4,7, file 2. That's my second array of things. And if I had a wider screen, I might have made 3 and 4. As many as you want in memory. So I split on dash dash dash. I've now got array of each group. I call this less common function get options from array on that array. This is like getop long, whatever it is, get options, but pass me an array and don't assume it's argv. That populates the options %options hash, picking out things like env, and it modifies group much like the usual one modifies argv, removing the options it's passed and leaves everything else there. Ultimately, those are going to be file names. Oh yeah, I've got a speaker note. This all sounds really complicated. It was 25 lines of code to do everything here. 10 lines of code for the split and 15 for the parsing. This saved an awful lot of work. All this seemingly complicated stuff. But I realized that effectively some of my options are global. So if I want to show tomorrow's crontab, I want dash dash show. But I don't really want to be able to, and I want to be able to suppress the environment on file 1 and ignore things on file 2. That top line, that one I want to work. The one below, I mean, I could make it work, but it looks silly. So I want to say that global options, like what day are we showing, what time period, those ones are only acceptable before the first set of dash dashes. So up comes another feature of getUpLong. There's a feature called pass through. What pass through does is say, if there's an option you don't recognize, don't throw an error, just leave it in the list of things, argv or similar, leave it there, something else can deal with it. If you ever, yeah, timing's fine. If you've ever dealt with a Perl core and tried to find bugs, there's a bisect runner script, or bisect script that I originally wrote. And it does the same trick in terms of it passes the arguments once, and this is how I learned it, it passes the arguments once and picked off the things it knows about, and then everything else it passes down to its the real worker. So it's roughly similar. We turn on pass through, that means unknown options are not errors. We take the first of our split up things, groups 0, and we call get options long from that, and it pulls out things like show tomorrow and the other global state options, which I've forgotten because, yeah, sorry. And then we're done with that. We've got our global options out. After that first pass, we'll end up with dash dash m foo equals bar file 1 in groups 0, because it's pulled out the thing it knew about and left the other stuff, no errors. And when it's touched, we then turn pass through off again, no pass through, and then we iterate over our entire array with the more restrictive set of things we're allowed, which are just the output related things. And so for the first line, and Mike does this, pass global options, pass that, fine. Second line, pass global options, yeah, that's fine. Sorry, and then pass that, error, because that is not in the second option string. I've called get whatever twice with different sets of what I'm allowed. So my global options configure my output object, and my per group options configure my input objects. So bringing that together, the whole of the parsing of this thing is iterate argv split on the dash dash, call get options for array. Hang on, I've gone. No, I've just got to muck this up. Grouping global options. Yeah, I think my brain is going there. Yeah, split on that. Call options for. No, I've gone backwards again, haven't I? I'm looking for that slide. Split on that. Call pass through. Pull the global options out. Turn pass through off. Iterate on this for each of the groups, which I think you pretty much described on the previous thing. And that is my entire parsing logic. I really shouldn't use the mouse. I said live demo. So I think that, let's see what I can drive. Aha! What's really confusing me, we don't know why, is that my task switcher is on there. What does it say? What does it say? May I suggest that you don't want. So if I run cron sequence, that. Okay, what file is that? Work. That's the original one. That one. Lunch, coffee and tea. Crontab syntax, one of its failures, you can't unset environment variables. So my lunch, which doesn't have an environment variable, had to go first. Then it sets an environment variable called milk with the value of little for coffee, and it has milk with lots for tea. And I think that's not the same as unset. There isn't syntax faults. It would be easy to allow syntax faults. Vixie's weird. Vixie crontab. It allows a weird subset of quoting. You can do things like put spaces and other weird, naughty words in environment variables, and then the shell will ignore them. It has all this functionality for putting weird stuff in the environment variable names in the parser that makes no sense. I read the parser code, so you don't have to. Let's see. That was what I'm going to do this year. The fix me was create a set of live demos so I don't have to goof it in public in front of you. I think it's flown off the top of the. That's me being silly. That's got two of them. I don't think my paste worked. See, told you. Never do a live demo. That's with ignore. I'm ignoring lines 4 and 7, and we just have, at this time, that line would say run coffee. That line would say run tea, coffee, tea. If I pull out the ignores, if I pull out ignore line 7, the environment variable in line 7 starts to be shown. If I pull out both ignores, all the environment variables are shown. I needed this functionality to make sense of things so it didn't get screenfalls of everything. I can actually ignore the line. So if I ignore line 5, I should have done that, sorry, like this. Top screen, get it to top screen. Ignore line 5, that whole coffee line is ignored. We're just talking about tea, which I'm sure will amuse somebody. I can have another crontab file, which runs that and says 5 days a week we go drinking. Do have 2 dry days, we're relatively good. And there we go. We should do these. It expands it and says that we could say that will assume that that environment variable has that default. So if I have a path setting at the top, it would previously said set path this, set path this, set this. So now I can take out an environment variable and not have it spam my output. Where was it in my history? That's the one. Right. That has 2 files. There's a dash dash that splits the 2 up. I will assume a default environment variable for the first file called play, and I will ignore lines 4 and 7 for work. And the screen falls off the top. With lunch worked okay. So I have T shown without the milk setting, and I said the environment variable should be something and it's unset. I should pick a better example. See, I didn't. But I can play with all sorts of things, and and now I can take out the environment variable for that, but the other file doesn't mention it at all. So the other file isn't showing any environment variables. This one's just showing that, the one about Kulch, and it's good. If I get this right, there is one more thing to show. Screen brightness has just gone down. Anything else? Oh. This is where the file is supposed to be. It's okay. No, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. So I have another cron tab, and yeah, someone scheduled a meeting across lunch. Because people do that. So that's got 2 output entries at the same time for work and the lunch and meeting happening at the same time. I have output in JSON. Well, if I had a type. But, you know, that's not very pretty, so I'm going to output in pretty JSON. And here we go, we're structured. So at 10 o'clock and 8 o'clock, sorry, we're going to have, at this epoch time, we're going to have coffee. At that epoch time, we're going to have tea. And then at this epoch time, 2 things run. Work and meeting. And it's been structured with 2 levels of arrays, so that effectively, that's kind of how the internal structures will work. I know that I have to set 2 things up and run them at the same time. Because remember, I'm trying to test things. But if I just wanted flat output, I can turn off grouping. And then it's one different structure with everything linearly. And that conflicting lunch and meeting are just shown flat. So that might be easy to pass if you're interested in something else. But yeah, we can generate JSON. And I think that was it for the live demo. I hope play goes back to where I wanted to be. I haven't even looked to see if anyone's tried to tell me I'm running out of time. Oh yeah, 10 minutes. So yeah, that's basically it. It does everything I need. So what happened next? Well, as I said, no plan survives contact with the enemy. This thing was escaped to CPAN in May last year. And then we got onto some other projects. I've been busy writing virtual machines that trap external output for the purpose of testing things without the bank seeing us. I've been busy merging our multiple code bases in Git into one single repository. Kind of got back to this by investigating libfaketime. It's packaged up in Debian. Well, I shouldn't pronounce the Debian, shouldn't I? Anyway, it's packaged up. It's a thing for setting the clock and faking it to processes. It's a library that lets you... It's a shared library override. You can say, this process will see this exact wrong time I care about. So rather than setting the system clock, we can just set the processes. I'm somewhere in the middle of investigating all of this, and then conferences happened. So I've not yet done my primary task. It has been very useful in rerunning history. When some of the systems was failed, Lee has gone, yeah, cool, this makes life a lot easier. What would have run? And rather than doing it in your head and getting it wrong, you can just say, take this cron tab, tell me what would run. So yeah, we aren't much further on the original plan. So we get to questions. So like questions, do one-legged ducks swim in circles? Are we hiring, and are there bonus slides? Here are some sample questions, you see. Clearly wasn't enough coffee. Should we do the bonus slides? One of the things was targeting language versions. Effectively, this is decided to start targeting Perl 5.20.0. If I've got this right, it's got the post-deref stuff, the arrow at star, arrow percent star. That's really quite nice. It's got the substitution returns flag, the R. That's actually, I think, 5.14, but hey, it's obviously in by 5.20. And 5.20's got hash key value slices, which are also a very nice feature. I should note my speaker notes, but the post-deref is 95% there. It didn't do string interpolation at that point, but I haven't needed that, but that's a gotcha to be aware of. But pretty much, unless you really, really care about writing toolchains options, modules, sorry, target that at least. If your company is using a current version of Perl, there's no point in trying to ignore all these nice things. And for even stuff on CPAN, I just decided this is new enough. If you want my module, you're going to do that, because it's made my life much, much easier. Another one fun. Yeah, so I think you've heard of the joke conference-driven development as a riff on test-driven development. Well, this actually we have blog-driven development. Lee went to write a blog post about this thing. You can see how long ago this was. And Lee's draft of the blog post had that line, something like 2-2 date, because there's to and from for putting time ranges rather than showing today, tomorrow. And so I ran this on the Mac rather than the Linux box, and date gave me an invalid argument second for... Oh. Yeah, I thought this is daft having all this shelling out, because you could just pass the arguments. So added a feature in that version that you put ISO date times in. So yeah, we had blog-driven development where something got better because someone wrote a blog post. The other thing that might be useful structurally, that command line parser is implemented as a module. The actual cron sequence of scripts that I ran with all the comments stripped out is pretty much, though, 6 lines. We set a version string, come to that why in a moment, for output about versions. We call the parser subroutine. We build a sequencer object. For the input, we build a formatter object from the output, and then we send it to standard output. Job's a good one. You should note that parseargv takes a pod to usage subroutine reference. That might seem completely daft. That's for the purpose of testing, so that in my test scripts I pass in something else that captures and verifies what's going on. But this meant that all the regression tests are written as method calls on parseargv or similar, and I don't have to shell out to anything in a test or anything like that. So yeah, as to testing, why am I setting version? Ow! One back. There are 2 features of Getopt long called auto-help and auto-version. Auto-version gives you a -- version command line option, which will report what version your tool is. And it does this by looking at the main version variable, which is what I set previously. Auto-help is really useful, and it sets a -- help option and a single question mark, and those let you produce help output, and it does that with pod to usage. Now, I was testing things, so I wanted to test these. It's a right pain to test these. They're very elegantly implemented internally as callbacks using the callback mechanism, but it turned out that I had to jump through the following hoops. I had to set up a sig warn handler, because if I got it wrong, they iterated warnings, and I wanted to verify I didn't generate any. I had to override a sub called autoversion or auto-help because it was going to call to that. And in that, my override sub, what I ended up having to do was collect the arguments from @_, emulate exit by calling goto, and only then die. I mean, you'd think I could just call exit, but that would course quick test gone. I couldn't call die at that point because the whole thing was wrapped up in an eval. So I had to avoid its eval seeing my code. This is my speaker notes again. And make sure it went into... Yeah. So I had to avoid its eval catching it. And instead jump with goto. I think that's the first time I've ever used goto in Perl, not in the, go sideways into a subroutine, but literal goto. So then, and of course I rethrowing I go to a die statement that actually dies with my real message so that test fatal can see it soon after. I just want to check. Yeah, that was it. And the last bit, you saw that JSON flag. This good news is the last bonus slide. There's a kind of Getopt limitation. I can enable that I have a dash dash JSON, as I showed you. I can have a dash dash JSON equals pretty. That's cool. That turns on pretty. I think there was one more I could turn on. But I also want this equivalence. I want to be able to say dash dash JSON pretty, space pretty, and have it mean the same thing as effectively dot pretty dash dash JSON. Like turn on the JSON without options and treat this other thing as a regular parameter, which in my case is going to be a file name. Because future proofing, I would like to be able in the future, if someone comes up with a good idea, to add different options to JSON, and I don't want to break existing code by suddenly, it used to be a file name, but now it's. And as best I can tell, what I want, an optional argument that must use equal sign to specify it, is not actually a feature of Getopt long. It might be the only thing it can't do. I just couldn't find a way to do this. So I have custom special case JSON parsing that goes through at the beginning, looks for dash dash JSON, optionally followed by equals, and pulls it out of arg wherever we are at that point to do it. So that was the only thing I couldn't find from Getopt long that it wanted. And someone should have given me whatever. Oh, hang on. If you actually get there, we hit end of show. Which I could just demonstrate. I have to change focus. So if I do that, yeah, can't open pretty. That's my custom parsing. And I should probably just demonstrate help. I think overrides everything else. So that's a help. And version pulls up that wonderful thing that my cron sequence of version is 0.5, and that's my Getopt long stuff. And that really is everything, and I'm scared that no one had any questions. Oh, cool! Paul. Yeah?
And on that scale of content, what happens if someone friendly sysop comes along and then says, oh, actually, I want to put the content in different places and stuff, and then all get hooked into it.
Right. So, he's not, yes. Your worst enemy. Yeah, I'm going to repeat this. Your worst enemy comes and rearranges the cron tabs and all the line numbers change. What goes wrong with all your filtering? Well, my filtering here was really for testing in my personal sandbox at the time of this fixed piece of code, this fixed piece of code. This filtering is not intended for production. So I think it's a fair question. I hadn't thought of that, but it wasn't going to affect our use case. And I think the filtering had to be line by line. Max had his hand up next, and then...
If you also output things as JSON, how do you order cron-chat entries that happen at the same timestamp?
If I'm outputting as JSON, how do I order them from the same timestamp? Well, by default, it grouped them until you told it not to. Tries to remember. I think it's implementation detail, and I think that ends up being order it built it in, and order it built it in would be order it past the files and within that line order. But I think the short answer was don't rely on that. But it was a fine question. Where?
I don't know if I remember correctly, but you can have shellcode in front of it.
Do you remember if you have shelter? Yeah,
like variable settings.
Yes, you can set environment. Yeah, so yes, you can have shellcode. You set environment variables, but it's not standard shellcode. At least Vixie crontab is not standard shellcode. You do remember correctly enough. We're basically setting path to something without spaces in it. The Vixie crontab parser will accept a double quote matched to a double quote, a single quote matched to a single quote. It doesn't do backslash escaping of any sort. It gets, I was going to use a naughty word, grumpy if you put a space beyond the end of a quote. It's not a standard shell thing.
But so you don't need to evaluate shellcode. Variables.
I don't need to evaluate bash code. No, not at this time, but I missed a speaker note. I kind of do for our actual use case, because our cron tabs are running in GMT, but we're using a thing we found on the internet. It's called cron_tz.sh that waits until this time in the time zone. So, like, when summertime in the UK waits for BST, and that is a shell script, and that potentially is running its things through shell. And I'm going to have to deal with that, and I think I'm going to have to deal with that by effectively implementing at jobs, like run once at this time, so that when the cron fig fires, it goes, I would run this shell script. I know what that special case for that shell script is. I look at all the code and go, it would be shell code. And that's where you're right. I'm going to make my parser say, this looks like shell code. I can't handle it. Because all our stuff is really simple with no shell expansion. But real shell expansion is things like double quotes, and then inside double quotes, backticks and dollar whatevers can expand. And yeah.
I might have a solution for that. We can talk later.
Yeah. Later might be after the lightning talks or tomorrow, because I've still got a lightning talk to write. Oh no, it's him again.
Me again, yeah. Last year Lee talked about replacing crontabs with RabbitMQ.
Yep.
How much has that progressed, and are you able to replay RabbitMQ stuff in the same way that you're doing that with crontabs?
I should repeat the question first before Lee then tells me. Lee talked last year about replacing crontabs with RabbitMQ, and how's that going, and can we replay those? And maybe Lee should answer half of this.
The answer is that we've replaced a lot of the annoying runs every 5 minutes with RabbitMQ, and then we do have things that can figure out, oh, we need to replay stuff, we need to push stuff back onto queues, which used to be the cron jobs, but they don't run anymore. So if there's a problem, we can rerun them. So yeah, we're making progress, basically.
Oh, I can't see you till I look. I've been given 0 minutes. I think that means I'm supposed to shut up. Thank you. I shouldn't I? Wrong myself.